Hello, Matthew Bell with insuranceprescription.com, and today I wanted to run through 10 mistakes that people make with respect to their retirement. Now, these are going to be 10 common mistakes that can crop in at various different stages in both planning and execution of a plan for retirement. Just as kind of a refresher, in other places I have described the retirement planning process as coming in 3 steps. Essentially, the first step is the contribution period, where you put aside some kind of savings for retirement. Then there's the accumulation phase, where hopefully what you've put aside starts to grow. There's some kind of an accrual value or gain. You earn something on that money. Then the final stage, of course, is when you start to withdraw money. You take distributions, as it might be called, on both the contributions and the gain that you have enjoyed. But at every stage, something can go wrong. And the 3 parts of this that I kind of wanted to identify are going to be contribution errors, the distribution phase errors, and then kind of general planning errors. Of course, the accumulation phase also can be fraught with difficulty, but in a lot of ways, you don't touch the money in that phase. So if you have a problem in the accumulation phase, it might be due to the fact that you're contributing to the wrong vehicle, or that you have distributed something too early or withdrawn money too early. There can be other problems. And so what I would like to focus on in this video are the things that you have control over. You might not have control over the amount of earnings that you get. You can't control the markets, for instance, but you might be able to control your contributions, your distributions, and at least the general contours of your planning. Mistake number 1 is essentially not having a plan at all. So this is a mistake because having some kind of a plan is going to be better than having no plan. It's often said that a failure to plan is basically a plan to fail. I've talked in other videos about how you can converse with various different advisors. I have a video where I actually outline 4 advisors that I would tell you should at least have a conversation with, and I'll put the link in the description and put a screenshot here of the thumbnail for that video. But another part of not having a plan is, in a sense, not actually following through with it. And so the first mistake is going to both involve not having a plan as well as not following through. So not saving, putting it off, procrastinating. This can be a real killer because one of the things working in your favor if you start saving early is going to be time. Time is essentially going to be a compensation for not having a large initial investment. The more time you give it, even at a modest rate of return, you're likely to see more results than you would if you put off investing until a later period of your life. Now, the second mistake, again having to do with contributions, is going to be selecting the wrong retirement vehicle. Now, this is going to be very dicey. Often, retrospect, you're going to realize something's the wrong vehicle, but as they say, hindsight is 20/20. How can you do your best? How can you put your best foot forward in trying to select a retirement vehicle? I have other videos where I get into the nitty-gritty of this, but essentially they're going to include things like the tax status of the money. They're going to include things like whether or not you get a match. So for example, in the case of your employer plan, they're going to include different things in terms of the risk tolerance that you have. So there's a lot of different factors here, and I get into some of those in other videos. So number 3, related to the selection of vehicle, is going to be ignoring your employer match. So one of the big mistakes that many retirement experts, and I'm not a retirement expert, I should say I'm not a financial advisor. I can't give you specific advice. This video is simply intended for research purposes only. It's simply intended for entertainment purposes only. I'm trying to give you leads that you can follow up on as you see fit. But many retirement experts are going to say it's a huge mistake if you have a 401k or some other employer-sponsored plan to not take advantage of the match, and in fact to not take full advantage of the match. So if you have to put in 5% of your paycheck to get your full match, these experts would suggest you need to be putting 5% in. If you need to put in 8% to get a 6% match, and that's the limit, you should put in 8%. So in other words, many retirement experts are going to tell you, take full advantage of your match. Now when it comes to the distribution phase, or when it comes to errors that you can make with respect to distribution, and they can happen at any time, some of those are going to be as follows. So mistake number 4, taking early withdrawals. So this is a mistake because there is an early withdrawal penalty that's going to apply in many cases. So before the age of 59 and a half, you're not permitted, the IRS doesn't permit you to take distributions from your retirement account without a penalty. So the penalty is usually 10% on top of whatever other tax would be owed on the distribution. Now this is going to depend on whether it's a Roth, whether it's a traditional IRA. The rules are going to be different. So again, I say it's essentially a 10% penalty on the top of whatever would be taxable. Now sometimes early withdrawals are allowed for various emergency situations, sometimes for first-time home buyer, some other considerations that are applicable here. But in general, many early withdrawals, they're called premature withdrawals, are going to run afoul of this penalty. And it's not simply a matter of the penalty, because many retirement experts are going to tell you that if you withdraw money from your retirement account, not only are you subjecting yourself potentially to a penalty, but you're also reducing the amount that you have saved for your retirement. So you're jeopardizing the long-term viability of your retirement plan. You're losing out on the money-making potential of that money and many other things that are to your detriment from the standpoint of the retirement. So one person that I've had interactions with kind of put it this way. I'm sure he didn't originate it, but he said, think about the difference between present you and future you. So present you may need to take a loan or may think it advantageous to take money from your retirement account, but future you, the person who's actually going to be having to rely on that money for retirement, that person may find it very difficult to get by because present you has taken some of that money and used it in advance. Fifth error in terms of withdrawals comes actually in retirement. So at the age of 72, and the Secure Act passed in 2019 and was effective on January the 1st of 2020, the Secure Act bumped the required minimum distribution age from 70 and a half to 72. But not taking a required minimum distribution when it is required opens you up to a 50% penalty on the amount that was required that you didn't take. So it's a huge penalty. You can think of it and sometimes referred to as an excise tax, and it applies on top of whatever taxable portion you were required to take. So if you're required to take $10,000 and you don't take $10,000, $5,000 of that is simply lost to the penalty, and on top of that, you still have to pay the tax on $10,000. So make sure you're up on your required minimum distributions when it comes time to have to take them. Now, a sixth error that many experts are going to suggest is carrying debt into retirement. Now, sometimes debt can be a good thing, sometimes it can help you. And the way that it might help you is, for example, if you're able to leverage your money in some way. Some people use debt strategies as just part of their planning. And if you're doing it on purpose and you understand the ramifications and you're getting good advice, this might not be an issue. But for some people, they might have a high interest credit card. They might carry in a mortgage into their retirement. And depending on the view that you take, it might be good to pay those debts off. Certainly in the case of high interest debt, revolving debt, obviously just for general financial purposes, you're going to want to try and remove that as a liability from your portfolio, but it can detrimentally affect you in retirement if you don't properly attend to your income and expense ratio, and your expenses are going to go way up and be maintained at a higher level if you don't address the debt situation. So one of the ways to make your money go further in retirement is to reduce your debt. Now, when we get into or consider some of the mistakes that you can make in the planning phase, one of the mistakes, and this is number 7, is going to be having inadequate, inaccurate, or in some other ways erroneous expense projections or projections about income. Now, having bad projections is simply a function of the fact that we don't know for sure what's going to happen. So to some degree, projections are going to have some kind of a margin of error. But here, what I have in mind is simply not thinking through what your expenses are going to be, not being honest with yourself maybe about the kind of retirement that you want to have, or not being honest with yourself about actually what the expenses are going to look like, or not being honest with yourself or not realizing what market returns realistically you're likely to have. So another way that projections can be bad is if you overestimate what you are going to get in a particular vehicle. So if you think that the stock market's going to give you 15% return, probably obviously over the top, but according to many observers, even thinking you're going to get an 8 to 10% return might be overstating things depending on how you go about it. And so I have other videos on this, I'm not going to get into it now, but projections can be a major, obviously they're a major component of retirement planning, And so the aim here is to be as accurate and honest and thorough as you can possibly be when performing these calculations. Now, an eighth mistake is going to be relying too heavily on Social Security. And one of the reasons this could be a mistake is because maybe the Social Security Administration won't be able to provide the benefit level that you are anticipating. But apart from that, one of the mistakes that can crop up in this regard is simply not realizing that Social Security is only really designed at best to cover 40% of the money you made pre-retirement. So you might be thinking about Social Security as being able to continue a standard of living in such a way that's really not realistic and certainly not based on the historical projections, and that's even if Social Security does not see a diminishment in its ability to pay benefits out in the coming years. A ninth mistake is going to be not addressing or thinking about taxes. So one of the major concerns that you might have in your retirement portfolio, and one of the major things you might overlook, is the fact that you're going to have to pay taxes. And so tax rates can be variable. Tax rates might go up depending on the kinds of commentaries that you are inclined to read or believe. Predictions, it's very hard to obviously know what's going to happen in the future. We can't know for sure. One of the things that is for sure is that you are going to have to contend at some level with taxes. And so one way to address this is to try to diversify your tax situation. And what I mean by that is different retirement vehicles are taxed differently. So just to pull two examples out, you have a Roth IRA, then you have a traditional IRA, and the 401k. The traditional IRA and 401k are essentially taxed such that contributions, you get a deduction on them, the money grows tax deferred, and then you're taxed on 100% of the distributions that you take. On the other hand, Roth IRAs, the contributions do not get a tax deduction. Since the money grows tax deferred, the benefit comes on the back end. According to present rules, you get tax-free distributions provided that you're 59 and a half and that the Roth has been open for 5 years. And I go into this in more detail in separate videos on each of these vehicles. But the point is that depending on the vehicle that you select, the way you're taxed is going to change. And many people have all of their money, let's say in a 401k or in a traditional IRA, and this is going to open them up to certain concerns when it comes to, let's say, tax rates going up. Now, I can't unriddle all of this, but I can say that many advisors are going to suggest that you try to spread your tax liability around by putting money into vehicles that are taxed differently so that not all of your money is in the same basket with respect to how it's taxed. Now, the 10th and final error that I'm going to get into here is not appreciating the effect that rising healthcare costs are going to have on your portfolio potentially, as well as not appreciating the risk that you might run into the need for long-term care in the future. So Fidelity estimates approximately $275,000 will have to be spent on your health care in your senior years during your retirement. A related concern is for people who don't sign up for Medicare on time or in the right way and are then subjected to a penalty through Medicare. But a final way, really, and I get into this in greater detail and in much more depth in other videos, is the potential that you're going to need some kind of long-term care. The statistics here are highly variable depending on who you read, but they end up being between, let's just say, around 30% and 70% that you're going to need long-term care. And if we put that number just in the middle at 50%, it's essentially a coin flip. That's a high probability. 1 out of 2 people on that medium kind of view are going to require long-term care, and that is a considerable threat to your retirement assets, to your legacy planning, your estate planning, and to your family. So this has simply been a very quick overview. If you found something of use in this video, I ask that you like it, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be alerted to new content as it becomes available. I thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you again in another video. And I remind you, I get into greater detail on almost every one of these in at least one other video, and I invite you to take a look at those if you're interested, and certainly I intend and have planned additional content to expand on these ideas even further. Thank you so much, and I wish you happy retirement planning.